When we're looking at this challenge about interpreted versus compiled languages, we're faced with the question, what's the fundamental difference between an interpreted and a compiled language? I'm not going to type this out, but I will take the time to go ahead and explain it. When we're talking about an interpreted language, this is a language that is compiled into machine code, that is a version of code that can actually be executed by the processor in your computer, sort of step by step and just as it's needed. So it will only compile the code right before it's executed. And if you encounter any errors in that compilation, it will crash your program and give you an error or an exception. Now, a compiled language is actually translated into that machine code all together at once before it can ever be executed. So when you have compiled code, you have two sort of advantages depending on the application, where you'll be able to make sure that your code is free of errors well in advance. So you're not going to have a syntax error unknowingly inside of a function that's going to crash your program while it's running, right? That'll be found during the time that the code is being compiled time. That would be a compile time error. Whereas in Python, that type of error would be an executable time error, right? It'll actually crash a running program. The other sort of the other advantage to maybe having a compiled language is that in general they have a tendency to run much faster because they're already translated into code that the computer can understand, as opposed to having to be interpreted sort of as it goes. That said, interpreted languages are much easier to write in general, Python especially, and there are also some other advantages. But those are the main differences between the two. Both languages end up being compiled. It's just a matter of when they're compiled. Compiled languages are compiled entirely in advance, where interpreted languages are compiled just in time, right? Just as they're being executed, line by line. So that's the difference between interpreted versus compiled languages. Hopefully that you were able to come up with a sentence or two that was similar to that notion.